Love knowing how far our stories reach. I sprinted down that hallway as if the world were ending. My shoes echoed loudly on the linoleum floor, producing that hollow sound unique to hospitals, mingled with the acrid scent of disinfectant burning my throat. My heart hammered so fiercely I could feel it in my temples, in my neck, in every inch of my 64-year-old body that suddenly felt 1,000 years old. The call had come 35 minutes earlier. Richard, my son, the only one I have in this world, was in the ER. The operator's words still reverberated in my mind like a funeral bell. Serious accident, critical condition. Come immediately. Come. I didn't hesitate. I placed the pot on the stove, grabbed my purse, and rushed outside to stop the first taxi I could find. Throughout the entire ride, my hands trembled so badly that I could scarcely hold my phone. I attempted to call Jessica, my daughter-in-law, but she did not answer. I left 3 voicemails, each one more frantic than the previous. Jessica had always been distant towards me. Ever since Richard introduced her to the family 5 years ago, I sensed something peculiar about her. It wasn't outright dislike, but a deliberate coldness, as if she was constantly evaluating me, weighing me on some unseen scale. She would smile only when necessary. She spoke the appropriate words at appropriate moments, yet her eyes never truly matched her words. They looked empty, like the windows of an abandoned house. I tried to dismiss that feeling. After all, Richard loved her. He would brighten whenever he spoke about her. His eyes would sparkle in a way I hadn't seen since he was a young boy receiving a Christmas gift. Who was I to question my son's happiness? What kind of mother would I be if I let my unfounded suspicions outweigh his love? So I suppressed my doubts. I smiled through family dinners when she barely spoke to me. I accepted the automated hugs on birthdays. I pretended not to notice when she subtly rolled her eyes whenever I made a suggestion or told a story. Richard either didn't see any of it or chose to ignore, and I wasn't going to be the nagging mother pointing out flaws in his wife. But over the past 2 years, things worsened. Richard began visiting less often. The calls grew shorter and more distant. He always had an excuse: too much work, Jessica not feeling well, other plans. I understood, or at least I tried to. My son was building his own life, his own family. It was natural for me to step back, but still, it hurts. God, how it hurts when you realize you're becoming invisible to the person you brought into this world, the person you loved unconditionally from the very moment you held them in your arms. How many nights did I stay awake, questioning what I had done wrong? Where had I failed as a mother? The taxi halted in front of the hospital, and I practically leapt out, throwing money at the driver without waiting for change. My feet pounded the pavement as I hurried toward the emergency entrance. Everything around me was a swirl of colors and sounds. People coming and going, ambulances with sirens piercing the air, nurses pushing stretchers. None of it registered. Only reaching my son mattered. The receptionist indicated the way with the cold efficiency of someone accustomed to tragedy daily. 3rd floor, West Wing, room 3018. I entered the elevator with an elderly couple who were softly crying. The woman leaned on her husband, who mumbled words of comfort that sounded empty even from afar. I wondered what pain they carried, what loss awaited them upstairs. When the doors opened on the 3rd floor, I rushed out without looking back, my eyes scanning the doors for the numbers. 302, 304, 306. I was heading in the right direction. My lungs burned, but I couldn't stop. Not until I saw him, not until I knew he was alive. Breathing and present. 310, 312, 314. Almost there. My heart pounded so fiercely I could barely hear my own thoughts. The only things that existed were that endless corridor and the increasing numbers on the doors. 316, his room would be next. That was when I felt a firm hand grip my arm. The touch seemed to come from nowhere, like lightning on a clear day. I almost screamed in surprise, but before I could make a sound, another hand softly covered my mouth. A woman's voice whispered urgently in my ear, so close I could feel her warm breath on my skin. Quiet. Get in here quickly. It was a nurse. I recognized her by the light blue scrubs at a glance, the ID badge hanging from her neck. She didn't appear threatening, but there was something intense in her dark eyes, an urgency that compelled me to obey instinctively. She guided me into room 317, right beside Richard's chamber, and softly shut the door behind us. My heart pounded even more fiercely. What was going on? Why had this woman pulled me into an empty room? I opened my mouth to question her, but she raised a finger to her lips, indicating silence. Listen, she whispered, pointing at the walls dividing the two rooms. "Just listen and trust me when I say you need to hear this before you go in there." Confusion, fear, and desperation coursed through me. Nothing added up. Yet something in her expression, something in the absolute earnestness on her face, made me stay still. It compelled me to press my ear against that cold divider and listen. At first, all I heard was the muffled murmur of voices. Gradually, the words began to emerge clearly, and what I overheard froze the blood in my veins. Jessica's voice sliced through the wall like a sharp knife. There was no emotion in it, no sign of the concern you would expect from a wife whose husband was in the hospital. It was cold, calculated, almost bored. "How long until we can process the paperwork?" A man's voice responded, calm and professional. "It depends. If he remains unconscious for another 48 hours, we can apply for an emergency power of attorney. With your signature as his spouse, you'll have full access to his accounts, properties, everything." My stomach twisted. I pressed my ear more firmly against the wall, ignoring the ache beginning to form on the side of my face. The nurse beside me held a phone, the screen displaying an active recording app. She was documenting everything. And what if he wakes up? Jessica's voice carried a note of irritation, as if she were discussing a minor nuisance, an inconvenience. "What if he regains consciousness and they start asking questions? Then you claim he signed everything before the accident. I've already prepared the documents. They are backdated. No one will question it." The man's voice was smooth. Husbands tend to trust their wives, especially during crises. There was something in the way he spoke, an eerie familiarity, that made me realize this wasn't his first time running such a plan. He was a lawyer. It had to be him. The legal jargon, the professional detachment, the way he described fraud as if it were merely another bureaucratic process. "Perfect," Jessica replied, and I could almost see her smiling. "And what about the apartment that old woman left him? The property is in his name, isn't it?" Old woman. She was talking about me, my apartment, the one I had registered in Richard's name 3 years ago. When I believed my health was declining, when I wanted to ensure he'd have something if I passed away first. It had been my home for 40 years, the place where I raised my son alone after my husband left us. Every piece of furniture, every photograph on the wall held priceless memories. Yes, it's in his name. The estimated market value is around $500,000. The lawyer explained, "Once you have the power of attorney, you are free to sell or transfer it in any manner you choose." $500,000, they mentioned, referring to my home, my entire life, as if it were merely a figure on a spreadsheet. My legs began to tremble so uncontrollably that I had to brace myself against the wall to avoid falling. The nurse held my arm gently, offering quiet support, while she continued recording. Great. "So, in the worst-case scenario, if he makes a full recovery, we can still transfer everything before he realizes the truth," the lawyer said. "And even if he becomes aware later, it will be too late. The documents will be legally valid and dated prior to the accident. You could claim he agreed to everything, that it was part of a joint financial plan. It would be your word against his. Given that he had just experienced severe trauma, some mental confusion on his part would be understandable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jessica, the woman my son loved and the woman who slept beside him every night, was planning to steal from him while he remained unconscious in a hospital bed. But it wasn't merely theft. It was betrayal in its purest, cruelest form. "There's one thing that worries me," Jessica said after a pause. "His mother. She's incredibly persistent, always calling, always showing up uninvited. What should I do if she starts asking questions?" The lawyer responded, "You do nothing." He explained, "Legally, she has no rights to anything. Your son is an adult, married, and you are his wife. Even if she suspects something, there's nothing she can do. And given your history, any accusation she makes will only appear as a resentful mother-in-law trying to cause trouble." "History? What history?" Jessica asked. "I had never caused trouble. I never interfered in their marriage, no matter how much I wanted to. Sometimes I was always respectful. I always kept my distance when she asked me to. And then it hit me. Of course, Jessica had woven a narrative over the years. Small lies, subtle remarks, always portraying me as overbearing, controlling, unable to accept that my son had grown up. Richard probably heard such things daily, gradually absorbing the poison until his perception of me was entirely warped. Jessica still saw me as a threat, especially now. She would want to stay here constantly. She would insist on being involved in all the medical decisions. In that case, you should gently but firmly keep her away if necessary. Remember, you are the wife and have legal priority. The doctors will consult you first, always, and if she becomes too persistent, you can ask security to remove her, claiming she's interfering with his treatment and causing stress. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. Not now, not when I needed to hear every word, every detail of this insidious scheme. The nurse gently squeezed my arm, reminding me I was not alone. Understood, Jessica said. So, the plan is to wait 48 hours, obtain the emergency power of attorney, transfer everything as swiftly as possible, and address the mother-in-law if she becomes an issue. Correct? And what about the other matter? The one we discussed yesterday? There was a long, heavy silence. My heart stopped for a full second. What other matter? What else were they contemplating? I was still pondering it. Jessica finally responded, her voice dropping even lower. It's a significant step. Risky but necessary if you want to avoid future complications. Think about it. The lawyer said he's in critical condition. Any downturn would be understandable. Unfortunately common in cases like his. My blood turned to ice. They were speaking about... No, they couldn't be suggesting what I thought they were suggesting. This was madness. It was monstrous. It was, I know, Jessica said slowly, but I need more time to decide. That's a line I don't know if I want to cross. Time is on your side for now, but don't delay too long. The longer he recovers, the more complicated the situation becomes. I heard footsteps fading away, a door opening and shutting behind them. They had left. I stayed frozen against that wall, unable to move, unable to fully grasp the enormity of what I had just uncovered. The nurse stopped the recording and softly guided me to the vacant bed in the middle of the room. My legs buckled beneath me, and I sank onto it. My entire body shivered with waves of shock that radiated from my head down to my toes. Breathe, the nurse said gently, kneeling before me. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to take a deep breath and listen carefully. I tried. God knows I tried, but my lungs didn't seem to function properly. The air entered my lungs in ragged gasps, and I exhaled in sobs I could barely control. My head was spinning from the words I had just heard. Each sentence kept echoing in an endless loop. My name is Sarah, she continued, her voice steady but soothing. I have been working as a nurse here for 7 years, and over the past 2 weeks I started to suspect that something was wrong with your son. I forced myself to focus on her face. Sarah appeared to be in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back into a tight bun and eyes that conveyed a fierce determination. There was something about her that reminded me of a warrior, someone who had faced battles and refused to back down. Suspect what? I managed to ask, my voice trembling. Your son was admitted 2 weeks ago with unusual symptoms: extreme fatigue, mental confusion, and heart problems with no clear cause. The doctors conducted all the standard tests and found no conclusive results. They diagnosed it as severe stress and overwork. She paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, but I saw something that troubled me. Jessica was always here, always by his side, constantly very attentive. Too attentive. She brought food from home and insisted he only eat what she prepared. She monitored who was allowed to visit, the timing, and the duration of each visit, and every time I entered the room she would tense up as if I posed a threat. My stomach tightened again. Do you think she's poisoning him? Sarah hesitated for only a moment before nodding. I had started to suspect a week earlier that his symptoms weren't improving despite treatment. In fact, they seemed to be worsening. Consequently, I began observing more closely, watching Jessica when she didn't realize I was watching. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph. It depicted Jessica leaning over Richard's food tray, her back turned to the door. I took this picture 3 days ago. Look at what she's doing. I zoomed in on the image. Jessica was clearly adding something to the food, a fine powder she was pouring from a small packet. My heart sank into my stomach. Did you show this to anyone? I showed it to Dr. Hernandez, the head of the wing. He advised me to be cautious when making serious accusations without concrete evidence, explaining that a blurry photo wasn't sufficient, something that could easily be mistaken for a vitamin supplement or a harmless item authorized by doctors. Her voice carried a noticeable tone of frustration. But you didn't believe that, I responded, not as a question but as a statement. No, because I witnessed the same situation happen to my cousin 5 years earlier. Her husband had been slowly poisoning her with blood thinners. By the time we uncovered the truth, it was already too late. She succumbed to internal bleeding, and everyone assumed it was complications from an old surgery. Tears shimmered in Sarah's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away with resolve. I swore that if I ever encountered similar signs again, I wouldn't remain silent. Consequently, I initiated my own investigation. I managed to collect samples of the food Jessica had been bringing and sent them to a friend working at a private lab for analysis, and we discovered something. She then showed me another document on her phone. It was a chemical analysis report containing several technical terms I couldn't quite grasp. However, one phrase caught my eye. Highlighted in red, presence of heparin at toxic levels. What does that mean? Heparin is a component found in St. John's wort. In controlled amounts, it is used to treat mild depression, but in large doses, it triggers severe reactions when combined with heart medication. Exactly the symptoms your son is experiencing: fatigue, confusion, heart issues, and the most troubling part, from someone who might want to poison another, is that heparin doesn't appear in standard toxicology screens. My mind was struggling to process all this, overwhelmed by the amount of information and the horror of it. Why didn't you go to the police? I did yesterday. I handed all my evidence to a detective, but he told me I needed more. He explained that the unofficial lab report wouldn't be accepted in court, that we had to catch Jessica in the act or obtain a confession. She then smiled, an expression devoid of any joy, only grim satisfaction. And then today you called, revealing that your son had suffered a severe collapse and was being taken to the ER. I anticipated that Jessica would seize the opportunity. I knew she would become careless and overconfident, so I kept a close watch, waiting for the perfect moment. And you knew I would come, I said slowly, grasping the situation. Yes, and I knew they wouldn't expect you to arrive so quickly, so I waited for you in the hallway. When I saw that man walk into Richard's room with a lawyer's briefcase, I realized this was my chance. Our chance. I glanced at her phone, the recording icon still, visible on the screen. You captured everything, every word. And this time, it's not just my word or an unofficial account. It's her full confession, made with a lawyer as an accomplice, discussing fraud and possibly something even more sinister, possibly something worse. The words I had heard echoed repeatedly in my mind. Any setback would be understandable. They weren't merely planning to rob Richard. They were contemplating killing him. I need to see my son, I said, trying to stand. My legs still trembled beneath me, but an emerging strength was taking root inside. A cold, disciplined fury replaced the initial shock. Sarah grasped my shoulders gently. You can, she said, but you have to be careful. If Jessica finds out you overheard anything, she'll panic. She might destroy evidence, she might run, she might even take drastic action against Richard right away. So, what am I supposed to do? You act naturally. You're the worried mother who just arrived. Cry, break down, do exactly what she expects. Meanwhile, I'll go to the police with this recording. The detective I met yesterday mentioned that if I brought him something concrete, he'd act swiftly. How long would that take? An hour, maybe 2 at most. Can you maintain this act that long? I reflected on the years I spent smiling through the tears I wanted to shed, accepting crumbs of attention from Richard when I needed more. Enduring Jessica's subtle insults with composure. If I could do that for years, I could do it for 2 more hours. I can, I replied, with a firmness that even surprised me. The hallway appeared different as I left room 317. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter, the sounds more intense, every detail sharper and clearer. It was as if hearing that conversation had lifted a veil from my eyes, revealing the world in its true form. Dangerous, treacherous, filled with people concealing monsters behind charming smiles. I paused in front of the door to room 3018 and took 3 deep breaths. I had to do this perfectly. I had to be convincing. Richard's life depended on it. When I opened the door, my eyes immediately sought my son. Richard was lying in that hospital bed, pale as a ghost, with tubes inserted into his arms and monitors softly beeping around him. He looked so delicate, so different from the strong man I knew. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces right then and there. But the most shocking sight was not Richard. It was Jessica. She was sitting beside the bed, clutching his hand with a perfectly rehearsed look of concern. As soon as she saw me enter, her face shifted into a mask of compassion and sorrow. Tears shimmered in her green eyes, on the verge of falling at any instant. "Linda," she said, rising and approaching me. Oh, thank God you're here. I tried to call earlier, Ba, but she didn't complete her sentence. Instead, she embraced me. A hug that would have seemed genuine if I didn't know the truth. Her costly perfume filled my nostrils. That same scent that always made me feel inadequate, poor, inferior. I returned the embrace because I had to. I forced my body to rest against hers. Even though every fiber of my being urged me to pull away, when we parted, I finally allowed the tears that had been swelling in my eyes to fall. What happened? I asked, my voice trembling. They called me, saying it was a serious accident, but they didn't give any details. Jessica led me to a chair beside the bed, her hands gently clutching mine in a gesture I now recognized as insincere. It was part of her role. He had been in an important meeting when he suddenly collapsed. His colleagues immediately called an ambulance. She paused, dabbing at an imaginary tear. The doctors say it's his heart, that it's too fragile, that the accumulated stress has finally taken its toll. They are doing everything possible, but her voice cracked dramatically. It's serious, Linda. It's very serious. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and ask how she managed to sleep at night, knowing she was killing the man she had promised to love, how she looked in the mirror every morning and could bear her own reflection. But I didn't do any of that. Instead, I dropped my head into my hands and sobbed. It wasn't difficult. The crying was real. The desperation was real. Only the reason behind it was different from what Jessica imagined. Is he going to make it? I asked through my tears. The doctors don't know. They said the next 48 hours are critical. 48 hours. The same time frame she had mentioned during her conversation with the lawyer. It was the deadline she'd been waiting for to execute her plan. I moved closer to the bed and grabbed Richard's other hand, the one Jessica wasn't holding. His skin felt cold, unnaturally so. His face was devoid of any expression, showing no sign that he was aware of my presence. Richard, my love, I whispered softly, brushing his hair. Mom's here. You need to fight. Do you hear me? You have to come back to me. I glanced at Jessica across the bed, noticing her face softly filled with that sympathetic expression that now made me feel sick. You must be exhausted, I said quietly. How long have you been here? Since they brought him in, I couldn't leave him alone. Of course not, because if you did, someone might notice that something was wrong. Someone might interfere with your carefully planned scheme. You should go home, take a shower, get something decent to eat, I gently suggested. I'll stay here with him. I noticed a flicker of something in her eyes, hesitation, distrust, but it vanished just as swiftly as it had appeared, replaced by a faint, grateful smile. I thought to myself, I can't leave him. What if he wakes up and I'm not here? I will be here. I'm his mother, Jessica. I'm not going anywhere. For a moment, tension filled the air, a silent confrontation between us. I observed the gears turning in her mind, evaluating, calculating. Eventually, she exhaled deeply. Perhaps you're right. I'll just go home quickly, take a shower, and grab a few things. I'll be back in an hour. Take your time, I said, deliberately adding warmth to my tone. I'll keep an eye on him. Jessica rose to her feet, picked up her expensive handbag, and bent down to kiss Richard's forehead. I'll be right back, my love, she whispered, and the words carried so much falsehood that it made me want to vomit. As she left, softly closing the door behind her, I finally permitted myself to breathe. My whole body was taut with tension. Every muscle ached from the strain of pretending, of having to be civil to the woman who was destroying my son. I got up and locked the door, not willing to risk Jessica returning unexpectedly and catching me in the act. I searched the room thoroughly, opening drawers, inspecting closets, checking every corner. There had to be something, some physical evidence of her actions. Sarah had mentioned that Jessica brought food from home and was controlling what Richard ate, and then I found it. Hidden at the bottom of the extra bag Jessica always left hanging on the chair was a small metal tin. Inside there were several tiny packets containing a fine, slightly greenish powder. My heart leapt. This was it. The physical proof we needed. I quickly snapped a picture with my cell phone. Carefully, I returned everything exactly as I had found it. I couldn't let her realize we'd discovered it. I went back to Richard's side and took his hand once more. Hold on, I whispered. Just a little longer. We will free you from this situation, I assure you. Jessica returned precisely 57 minutes later, dressed in clean clothes with her hair still damp from the shower. She carried a bag of food, likely from that upscale restaurant on Fifth Avenue. Always the best things for Jessica. She always had the finest of everything, even as she stole from and poisoned the man who financed that lifestyle. I brought food, she said, pulling containers out of the bag. You must be starving. When was the last time you ate? I hadn't thought about food since the call from the hospital. My stomach was knotted so tightly that I couldn't even consider eating, but I had to keep up the act. I needed to pretend everything was normal. Thank you, I whispered, accepting one of the containers. You're very kind, she smiled. That smile probably enchanted everyone who didn't know the truth. We're family, Linda. We need to look out for each other during these hard times. Family. The word burned within me like acid. To her, we were never truly family. We had been nothing more than targets, pawns in a game she manipulated so skillfully that we remained unaware we were even part of it. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the steady beeping of Richard's monitors. I kept an eye on Jessica, watching her every move, every nuance of her expression. How could I have been so blind? Now, with the truth laid bare, it all seemed so clear. The cold sheen behind her eyes, the methodical way she weighed each word and gesture. Suddenly, Jessica broke the silence. Linda, she said abruptly, there's something I need to discuss with you concerning Richard's finances. My blood ran cold, yet I maintained a calm exterior. Finances? Yes. Just in case the worst comes to pass, and I pray it doesn't, but if it does, we must be ready. Richard had made some financial plans which I believe you should be aware of. She was just beginning, planting the seeds to justify the fraudulent transfers she intended to carry out. My fist clenched beneath the table, my nails digging into my palm. What kind of planning? I asked, keeping my voice calm. He had been worried about the future, about our security. Over the past few months, he transferred several properties into my name, including the apartment you gave him. Liar. A blatant liar. No such transfers had taken place. The apartment still belonged to Richard, and she was aware of that. She was testing the waters, trying to see if I would question it, if I had enough understanding of my son's finances to catch the lie. He had mentioned something along those lines. I responded smoothly with a lie. I said he wanted to ensure you were protected. I saw a relief flood over her face. She had believed it. She thought I was so oblivious, so disconnected from Richard's affairs, that I wouldn't suspect a thing. Exactly, she said, her voice more relaxed now. He loves me so much, always thinking of me first. I clenched my jaw so hard I tasted blood. I was tempted to shout the truth in her face. I wanted that mask of sympathy to crack when she realized I knew everything. But Sarah had made me promise. Stay calm, let the police do their work just a little longer. Suddenly the door swung open, startling us both. A different nurse entered, one I had never seen before. Excuse the interruption, she said. I need to check the patient's vitals. Jessica moved aside to give her space to work. I discreetly checked my phone amid the moment. There was a message from Sarah. Detective on the way. 20 minutes. Hold tight. 20 minutes. That's all I had. I could endure this. Just 20 more minutes of pretending, of acting like the naive mother-in-law Jessica always believed I was. The nurse completed her checks, jotting down notes on the chart. He's stable, she announced. No significant changes. Is that good or bad? I asked. Right now, stable is good. It means he's fighting. She left and we were alone once more. Jessica returned to her chair beside the bed, resuming her vigil as the dutiful wife. I wondered how many times she had rehearsed this role, how many hours she had spent in front of the mirror practicing that look of concern. You know, Linda, she began after a moment, I know our relationship has always been complicated. Complicated? What a polite word for years of poorly disguised contempt. But I want you to know that I have always loved your son. From the first day I met him, I knew he was special. Special? He was especially wealthy, especially naive, especially easy to manipulate. That's what she meant. And I know you had your doubts about me at first. Mothers always do, right? No one is ever good enough for their sons. She smiled as if we were sharing an intimate moment, but I hope that over time you've seen that my intentions were always sincere, that I genuinely want what's best for Richard. I lied to her then, the biggest lie I have ever told in my life. I see it now. I see how deeply you love him, how devoted you are, And I'm sorry I was so cold to you all these years. Her eyes gleamed with a barely concealed sense of triumph. She believed she had won, or at least she thought so. She hadn't just secured the husband and the money, she had now gained the approval of the troublesome mother-in-law, who had always been a thorn in her side. "That means so much to me," she said, her voice carrying a note of genuine sincerity. Not because she truly cared about me, but because my approval made everything easier. There was no resistance, no questions, no obstacles in her way. My phone vibrated again. Another message from Sarah. 10 minutes. Police at reception. Hold the door. I stood up, pretending to stretch my legs. "I'm going to get a coffee," I announced. "Want anything?" "No, thank you. I'm fine." I left the room and nearly ran down the corridor. Sarah was waiting near the elevators, accompanied by two plainclothes detectives, a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and a younger woman with sharp, observant eyes that seemed to see everything. "Mrs. Linda," the man asked quietly. "I am Detective Rogers, accompanied by Detective Martinez. Nurse Sarah presented us with the recording. We must take action immediately." "She's inside," I whispered, with my son. "Understood. We'll proceed quietly. We don't want to distress her or give her an opportunity to destroy evidence." Detective Martinez moved closer. "Did you find anything in the room? Any physical evidence?" I showed her a photo of the tin containing the powder packets. It was concealed in her bag. I didn't touch it. I only photographed it. "Excellent. That, combined with the recording and the medical tests we are about to request, should be sufficient." We returned to the room together. As I opened the door, Jessica looked up, her face shifting from relaxed to puzzled upon seeing the two strangers behind me. "Jessica," Detective Rogers said, displaying his badge, "we need to speak with you regarding some inconsistencies in your husband's treatment." Jessica's expression underwent a remarkable transformation. In just a few moments, I observed a rapid shift in her expression: confusion, fear, anger, and finally a cold, calculating look. She was skilled. I had to concede that. In fewer than 3 seconds, she managed to put her mask back on. "Inconsistencies?" she questioned, her tone tinged with concern. "What do you mean? Is something wrong with his treatment? Did the doctors make a mistake?" Brilliant. Already shifting the blame elsewhere, constructing an alternative story in real time, Detective Martinez entered the room and shut the door behind her. "Mrs. Jessica, we have reasons to believe your husband's death was not due to natural causes. We would like you to come with us to answer a few questions. Questions about what I don't understand concerning this. For instance, Rogers grabbed the extra bag from the chair and, with gloved hands, removed a metal tin. Jessica's face visibly paled, but she quickly regained composure. Those are just natural supplements. His doctor recommended them to boost his immunity." "Which doctor?" She hesitated for only a split second. "Dr. Ella Roan, his private physician." "We will look into that," Martinez said, making notes. "And what about this conversation?" She took out a small device and pressed play. Jessica's voice echoed clearly throughout the room. "I've been giving him the crush pills mixed with his orange juice in the mornings. A little more each week." Jessica's face went completely pale. Her eyes widened, desperately searching for an escape route or an explanation, anything to clarify that this was taken out of context. She began to protest, her voice rising. "I was talking to the doctor about the lawyer," Rogers corrected. "We have the full recording, including the segment where you discuss fraudulent property transfers and the potential of letting your husband die to facilitate access to his assets." Jessica then looked at me, and what I saw in her eyes froze me to the core. No more pretense, no more masks. It was pure, distilled hatred. "It was you," she hissed. "You meddling old woman. You never accepted me. You always looked down on me. You constantly tried to turn Richard against me. I tried to accept you," I replied, and my voice was unexpectedly calm. "I tried for 5 years, but you never truly wanted acceptance, did you? You only cared about the money, money I deserve." After years of tolerating him, tolerating you, tolerating this pathetic family, Jessica Miller, Detective Martinez said formally, pulling out handcuffs, "You are under arrest for attempted murder and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. This is absurd. You have no real evidence. It's just a recording that could have been edited or manipulated." "We have the packets of powder," Rogers stated calmly. We have your internet search history on hard-to-detect poisons. We have the changes in your husband's blood work. We have witnesses to your suspicious visits to his room at specific times. And we have your own voice, confessing to everything. The handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Jessica resisted briefly, but Martinez held her firmly with practiced professionalism. You can't do this. I'm his wife. I have rights. You had rights, I gently corrected. Now, all you have left is to stay silent and call a lawyer, although your former lawyer is currently being arrested as well, so you might need to find someone new. The intensity of rage in her eyes was so overwhelming that I briefly thought she would spit at me, but the detectives were already guiding her out of the room. At the door, she looked back one last time. He will never believe you when he wakes up. I'll tell him you faked everything, and he will choose me, just like he always did. He won't, a faint voice whispered from the bed. We all froze, turning toward Richard, whose eyes were open, fixed on Jessica with an expression of utter pain and betrayal. Richard? Jessica gasped, her voice suddenly soft, fragile. Baby, don't you understand? They're lying. They are attempting to tear us apart. I heard everything, he whispered, his voice strained from disuse. I woke up about 20 minutes ago. I heard every word you said to those detectives. Tears began to stream down his face. How could you? I loved you. I would have given you anything. Richard, no. Jessica was struggling against the handcuffs now, desperate to reach him. I love you too. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Get her out, Richard said, closing his eyes. I don't want to see her again. The detectives didn't need further prompting. They took Jessica from the room while she screamed, a mixture of relief and anger echoing down the hallway until they disappeared. When the door shut, the silence that followed was deafening. I hurried to Richard's side, holding his hand in both of mine. My son, I cried. My love, are you okay? Do I need to call the doctor? He admitted, I'm weak, but I'm alive, thanks to you. No, I shook my head vigorously. Thanks to Sarah. She was the first to suspect, the one who investigated, and the one who saved me from walking in blindly, unaware of what was truly happening. Richard looked at Sarah, who had stayed quietly near the door. Thank you, he said simply. You saved my life. She smiled warmly. I was just doing my job. It was much more than that, I argued. It was bravery. It was caring when doing nothing would have been easier. The following days blurred together, filled with doctors, tests, and a slow recovery process. They had to detoxify Richard's body from the substances Jessica had been administering for months. We found out it wasn't only hyperuracin. She had combined natural substances that appeared harmless on their own, but when taken together, they caused the debilitating symptoms that nearly killed him. During one of the consultations, Dr. Hernandez admitted, she's very clever. Very clever. If it hadn't been for Nurse Sarah's persistence and the timely discovery, we probably wouldn't have caught it in time. Each day, Richard showed small signs of improvement. The color returned to his face and strength regained in his muscles, but there was something different about him now, something that went beyond the physical. A profound sadness lingered in his eyes. An invisible burden he carried silently. I was so blind. One night, just the two of us alone in the room, he confided, Mom, all those years she manipulated me, turned me against you. It wasn't your fault. I was about to respond when he gently interrupted. Yes, it was. It was my fault for believing her lies. He paused before continuing, tears now streaming freely down his face. How many times did I try to get close and you pushed me away? How many birthdays did I forget? How many calls did I ignore? He looked at me with remorse. I treated you like a nuisance, like your love was a burden. And all along you were the only person who truly cared about me. Carefully I climbed onto the bed and embraced him, the way I hadn't since he was a little boy. You are my son. It doesn't matter how many times you push me away, I will always come back. I will always love you. I will always stand by you. We remained in that state for a long time, mother and son, healing wounds that extended far beyond the physical. The investigation uncovered more than we had anticipated. Jessica, it turned out, wasn't even her real name. It was Marianne Ferraro. She had a record of marriage fraud across 3 different states, including California and Nevada. She would marry affluent men, gradually isolate them from their families, seize control of their finances, and then vanish with everything. Why didn't she do that with me? Richard asked when I shared this. Why the poison this time? Because you hadn't given her full access to the finances, Detective Rogers explained during a visit. You kept separate accounts. You held the deed to the apartment. You never made her the beneficiary on your investments. She realized she couldn't just leave with the money, so she decided that being a widow would be a more advantageous position. Richard shivered. She was planning to kill me. He nearly did, Rogers confirmed with a bleak expression. Just a few more weeks and the damage to your heart would have been permanent. The trial was set for 6 months later. During that period, Richard made a full physical recovery at least. He sold the house he had shared with Jessica, unable to return to a place haunted by poisoned memories. Instead, he bought a smaller apartment closer to me in a quiet neighborhood in the city. Now, we spent more time together than in the past 5 years combined. Sunday dinners became our tradition, and Saturday morning walks in the park. We had long conversations about everything and nothing. I was rediscovering who I am. He once told me that without her voice in my head, guiding my thoughts and feelings, without her influence, it was both terrifying and freeing. He also started therapy. He explained that he needed to process not only the physical trauma, but also the emotional wounds, the betrayal, the manipulation, and the years lost. When the day of the trial finally arrived, we entered the courthouse together, hand in hand. Sarah was present as well, prepared to give her testimony. Dr. Hernandez and several toxicology experts also appeared. Jessica looked different, too thin, her hair dull, with dark circles deep under her eyes. Pre-trial detention had taken its toll. When her eyes met mine, I no longer saw anger. Instead, I saw resignation. She understood that she had lost. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented evidence after evidence, a recording, medical examinations, packets of powder, her history of previous fraud, internet searches for poisons, and security footage capturing her suspicious entries into Richard's room. The case was devastating and unbeatable. The defense argued that the recordings were inadmissible and that the evidence was circumstantial, but their objections were weak and too late. When Richard took the stand to testify, the entire courtroom fell into silence. He recounted the years of their marriage, describing how she gradually isolated him from me, ignoring the warning signs he failed to see, and recalling the orange juice she lovingly prepared every morning. I trusted her with my life, he said, his voice trembling, and she literally tried to take that life away from me. He looked directly at Jessica. Then I loved you. I would have done anything for you, and you only saw me as a bank account, something to be exploited and discarded. Jessica looked down, unable to meet his gaze. When it was my turn to testify, I shared everything, from my frantic dash through the hospital corridors to the moment Sarah saved me. I spoke about the conversation I overheard, about the horror of discovering that someone I had welcomed into our family was deliberately destroying my son. She called me a meddling old woman, I told the jury. And you know what? She was right. I am meddling because that's what mothers do. We meddle. We fight. We defend our children with everything we possess, even when those children push us away or when no one else notices their struggles. The verdict was announced on the 3rd day. Guilty on all charges. Attempted murder, fraud, forgery. The sentence was 30 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 20. When the gavel struck, Jessica did not cry. She simply sat there stiffly as she was led away. 6 months after the trial, Richard invited me to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown in Chicago, where we had gone for a brief trip. It wasn't a special occasion, or at least he hadn't claimed it was. But upon arrival, I realized this wasn't an ordinary dinner. Sarah was there, along with Dr. Hernandez, Detectives Rogers and Martinez, and several other people I recognized from the hospital. "What is all this?" I asked, confused. Richard smiled, a genuine smile I hadn't seen in years. It was a thank you dinner for all the people who had saved me. He stood up and grabbed a microphone that suddenly appeared from nowhere. "I want to express my gratitude to everyone in this room. You've given me my life back, not just literally, but by providing me with the opportunity to begin anew and become the person I was meant to be all along." He looked at me then, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Above all, I want to thank my mother, who never gave up on me, even when I pushed her away." She rushed to the hospital, driven solely by the desire to be by my side. She had the strength to listen when it would have been easier to ignore. She fought for me when no one else could. He paused, wiping away tears. "Mom, I spent 5 years being ungrateful, distant, and blind. But I swear I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you, being the son you deserve and the man you taught me to be." My tears could no longer be contained. I stood up and embraced him as everyone clapped. "You already are that man," I whispered. "You always were." Later that night, after everyone had left and it was just the two of us walking through the city's illuminated streets, Richard discussed his vision for the future. "I want to do something meaningful with all this," he expressed. "Maybe establish a foundation to assist victims of domestic violence and family fraud. That would be incredible. And I want you to be part of it, not just as my mother, but as a partner. Your story, your courage, can motivate others." I reflected on it for years. I had been invisible, overlooked, pushed aside. But in that moment at the hospital, when I overheard that terrible conversation, I discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. "Yes," I responded. "Let's do it together." Now, 3 years later, the New Dawn Foundation has already supported more than 200 families. We provide legal, psychological, and financial assistance to victims of abuse and fraud. We also train healthcare professionals to recognize the signs of domestic poisoning. We deliver speeches at hospitals, universities, and community centers throughout Chicago. Richard handles the financial and legal aspects, while I share our story, our journey from a near tragedy to redemption. Sarah, our silent hero, dedicates herself to training nurses nationwide to trust their instincts and not dismiss that uneasy feeling when something seems wrong. Jessica is currently serving her sentence in a state prison, and I've heard she now teaches English to fellow inmates. Whether she's found any redemption there, I cannot say, nor do I believe she fully comprehends the enormity of her actions. I don't dwell on her much. She doesn't deserve that space in my mind. Instead, I focus on second chances, how a single act of courage can alter everything. I believe it's never too late to reconnect, rebuild, or start anew. Now, Richard comes over for dinner every week. We cook, laugh, and heal together. He has also met someone new, a wonderful woman named Valerie, who works at the foundation. She is gentle, authentic, open, everything Jessica only pretended to be. And when I witness them together, when I see my son genuinely happy at last, I know all the sacrifices were worthwhile. Every moment of agony, every instant of fear in that hospital corridor, because I am a mother, and that's what mothers do. We fight fiercely, we protect fiercely, and we refuse to surrender. Even when the entire world claims we are wrong, even when our own children push us aside, even when we become invisible, we remain present, always waiting for the moment when we are called upon. And when that moment arrives, we summon a strength we never knew we possessed. I am now 67 years old. My hair has turned more silver. My wrinkles have grown deeper. Yet, I have never felt more powerful, more alive, more indispensable. Because on that terrible day in the hospital, I uncovered something essential. True love never abandons. And that is a lesson I carry with me every single day, one I share during every conversation with every family we assist. Never underestimate the strength of a mother who fights for her child. Never dismiss that intuition that warns you something is amiss. And never, under any circumstances, give up on those you cherish, because ultimately it is love that saves us. It is love that makes us indestructible. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to click subscribe and share in the comments which part left you speechless. And don't forget to become a member to gain access to exclusive videos. I don't upload content here. I'll see you over there.